Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again, and boy, have I got a tale that'll leave you absolutely shocked tonight. The Texas grid, independent, isolated, 300,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines stretching across the Lone Star State like a steel spiderweb. Most folks don't think about the towers, the transformers, the substations humming in the dark. They just flip the switch and expect the lights to work. But the old linemen understand something about storm season. They know better than to work the towers alone when the sky goes electric. They whisper stories about things that travel the lines, things that feed on voltage, things that hunt when the thunder rolls. Tonight, a 4-person crew gets called out to substation 47A north of Conroe. Midnight, rolling blackouts, possible fire. It should be routine, should be simple, should be safe. But some nights, the grid wakes up hungry. This is your late night creature feature. When the lights go out, something else turns on. Before we begin, I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Walking through the woods? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's talk about what walks the wires. The Grid Walker. Chapter 1. Dispatch. TJ Brewster didn't usually answer after-hours calls unless the pay made sense, but when the control center flagged him directly midnight, active rolling blackouts, possible substation fire, he knew it wasn't optional. Houston Grid Authority didn't call him at home just for overtime. Something was wrong somewhere north of Conroe, and TJ had been doing this long enough to know you don't ignore something wrong in the middle of Texas thunder season. He'd been doing electrical work for 22 years, started as an apprentice fresh out of trade school, worked his way up to senior field tech, knew transformers like some men knew engines, could diagnose a fault by sound alone. His ex-wife used to joke that he loved the grid more than her. She wasn't entirely wrong. The divorce papers proved it. He grabbed his rain jacket, flashlight, and steel toes, and stepped out into the thick humidity swallowing the city like a wet blanket. Lightning flickered miles away, lighting the low clouds yellow. The air already smelled like ozone. Storm was going to be bad. By the time he reached the service truck, 3 people were waiting. Theresa Mathews sat in the passenger seat, binder in her lap, reading glasses halfway down her nose like she wasn't entirely awake. She looked up at him with that HR half-smile, something between polite and terrified. 41, manager of employee safety and compliance. 2 kids at home with a babysitter who was probably charging double for midnight hours. She'd been with the company 8 years and had never been in the field. Not once. "I'm supposed to accompany field staff tonight," she said, tapping the binder. "New protocol since the incident last year." TJ snorted. "You're the HR manager, Theresa. This is a blackout, not a harassment seminar." She stiffened. "There are liability concerns about sending employees into isolated." TJ shut the passenger door harder than necessary and looked at the truck bed. Dalton Jones leaned against the tailgate, helmet in his lap, staring at the storm clouds like he was trying to look experienced. 23, maybe 24. Hadn't even been in Houston more than a year. Moved down from Tulsa, chasing better pay and warmer winters. Eager, nervous. Still thought electrical work was cool instead of just dangerous. And standing beside him, calm as Sunday morning, was Kevin Copeland. 45. Lean, quiet, with a kind of face that didn't give anything away. He'd been with Houston Grid for 5 years, came from somewhere in East Texas, never talked about it. Widower. Lost his wife to cancer 3 years back. No kids, no family that anyone knew about. He worked nights because he didn't like going home to an empty house. When Kevin showed up for a job, you knew it'd get done right. He didn't joke, didn't complain, just worked. TJ respected the hell out of him. Kevin met TJ's eyes, gave a single nod, and climbed into the truck bed without a word. Dalton scrambled in after him. TJ slid behind the wheel. "All right, let's go fix somebody's Friday night." They drove north through thinning traffic, street lights sliding past like orange reflections on black water. The farther they went, the darker it got. No houses, no billboards. Just pine woods and long stretches of nothing pressing in from both sides. Theresa flipped through her binder, muttering safety protocols under her breath. Dalton leaned forward between the seats, squinting through the windshield at the sky. "Why's the sky look like that?" he asked. Theresa glanced up. Lightning flashed again, but it wasn't normal. It crawled sideways across the clouds, almost neon white, like veins spreading through flesh. The rumble came late, like it got lost between layers of air. "Heat lightning," TJ said. "Storms building up pressure." He didn't mention the odd static creeping up the radio, or the faint metallic hum whenever they passed a utility corridor. Some things you don't spook the rookies with. In the bed, Kevin sat with his back against the cab, arms crossed, watching the towers slide past in the dark. His face was unreadable. By the time they turned off onto the service road, the truck headlights hit the gate of substation 47A. The sign dangled crooked, chain-link fence bowing outward like someone had tried to shoulder through it. The perimeter lights were dead, completely dark, not dim, dead. "Transformers don't go out all at once," TJ murmured. Dalton swallowed. "So what killed them?" Lightning cracked closer this time, bright enough to turn the whole yard into a negative image. In that split second, TJ thought he saw something massive hunch near the far tower, like a shadow made of heat shimmer. When the darkness dropped, it was gone. Theresa opened the binder with trembling hands. "Safety checklist step 1, verify lockout-tagout procedures." TJ cut her off. "Lights are out, no juice anywhere on site. Lockout won't matter until we trace the failure." Kevin stepped out of the truck bed, boots hitting gravel without a sound. He looked up at the silent towers, head tilted slightly, listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. Dalton climbed out, shivering, not cold, just something crawling up his arms, like static. The air around the metal structures buzzed faintly, like distant mosquitoes. TJ clicked on his flashlight and swept it across the yard. Grounding cables were melted, literally melted, like candle wax had dripped from the steel frame. The fence posts nearest the transformer looked scorched black, and something sharp had gouged into the metal. Deep scratches, parallel, like claws. Dalton crouched, running a glove over the warped chain link. "That ain't lightning. Lightning snaps metal, but it doesn't pull it out." Theresa took a nervous step back toward the truck. "Maybe a vehicle hit it?" "In the back of nowhere?" TJ asked, shaking his head. "Besides, look at the angle." Kevin walked past them without speaking, moving toward the main transformer. He stopped at the base, crouched, and ran his hand along a grounding strap. When he stood, his face was grim. "Copper's gone," he said quietly. "Not missing, gone. Consumed." TJ frowned. "Thieves?" Kevin shook his head once. "Thieves don't melt the wire." Lightning flashed again, white, violent. For a heartbeat, the transformer casing looked torn open from inside, like something had clawed its way out. Jagged metal bent outward, scorch marks radiating from the center. Then the dark clamped back down like someone killed the world's lights at once. Dalton whispered, barely audible. "The hell was that?" No one answered. Thunder rolled like deep machinery waking up under their feet. Kevin straightened, eyes fixed on the nearest transmission tower. Something fed here. TJ lifted his radio. "Dispatch, substation 47A activated on site. We've got structural damage and active surge evidence. We're going to walk the line, see if we can lock." Static exploded through the speaker, sharp, screeching, almost like someone screaming directly into the channel. Theresa slapped her hands over her ears, dropping her binder to the mud. Dalton winced. TJ yanked the radio away from his belt and stared at it. Then, suddenly silence. No static. No hum. No power. Just the sky rumbling, and something big shifting its weight somewhere out in the trees. Kevin's voice was calm, steady. "We should go." TJ looked at him. "We haven't traced the fault yet." Kevin met his eyes. "I know." The way he said it made TJ's stomach drop. But TJ had a job to do. "All right, stay close. If something's wrong with the grounding grid, we start at the main tower and work our way down the line." Dalton flicked on his own flashlight, hand shaking. Theresa didn't move. She stared at the binder in the mud, pages soaking through. "Come on," TJ said, calmer than he felt. "If we want the lights back on, this is the only way." He didn't tell them the truth. The power wasn't coming back on tonight. Whatever did this wasn't finished. Not even close. Chapter 2, Line Patrol. The service road cut north through the pines, just wide enough for the truck if they needed a fast exit. TJ led on foot instead, shining his beam along the grounding cables that ran toward the first transmission tower. Kevin walked beside him, silent, scanning the steel lattice overhead. Dalton stuck close behind, breathing too fast. Theresa trailed a few steps back, gripping a spare flashlight like a weapon. The forest felt wrong. Not quiet, wrong. Even the insects had shut up. No crickets, no night frogs, no cicadas, just the rumble of thunder and the constant impression that something was holding its breath in the dark. They reached the first tower. TJ swept his flashlight up the steel lattice. The beam flickered at the top just for a second, like it bent around something that shouldn't be there. Dalton frowned. "Why's my light doing that?" TJ didn't answer. He crouched, running gloved fingers along the grounding strap. The copper was scorched black. Worse sections were missing, like something had eaten the metal. Not cut. Not stolen. Eaten. "What could do that?" Dalton asked. Kevin knelt beside TJ, studying the damage. His jaw tightened. "Something that feeds." TJ looked at him. "Feeds on what?" Kevin touched the blackened copper, still warm, current. Theresa took a nervous step back toward the road. "Maybe we should wait for a bigger crew. The policy says emergencies require at least 4 certified." A metallic skitter cut her off. High above, on the tower. Dalton swung his flashlight upward. The beam trembled across steel, catching nothing but shadows and crossbeams. "Did you hear?" Dalton started. Lightning flashed white across the sky, pure horizontal light etching the world into sharp relief. Something clung to the tower frame. Limbs too long, stretched like wires pulled too tight, body pulsing with faint internal light, almost like glowing veins beneath translucent skin. The head, if it was a head, was a cluster of tendrils, probing the metal, snaking into bolt holes. Then darkness. Total. Dalton staggered backward. "Nope, nope, nope." TJ grabbed his arm. "Don't run. Running makes you step where you can't see." Theresa's voice cracked. What was? Something metal screeched above them. The tower geometry hummed, like a tuning fork struck in the bones. Sparks flickered along the steel. Tiny lightning arcs jumped between bolts, crawling like insects. Kevin's voice was quiet, steady. "Back away, slowly." TJ pulled Dalton and Theresa away from the frame. Whatever that is, it's energized. Dalton stared, mouth slightly open. "How? The power's dead. We killed the breaker." "I know what we killed," TJ muttered. Another flicker, this time along the next tower down the line. A flash. A crackle. Then the next tower. Then the next. Like something moving through the structures themselves. Traveling the grid. Kevin watched the progression, face grim. "It's hunting." Theresa clutched her flashlight tighter. This feels wrong. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. TJ listened, trying to parse thunder from something else. A soft tick echoed from inside the tower steel. Then another, like metal cooling. Except the metal wasn't cooling. It was warming up. Dalton whispered, voice shaking. TJ, it's feeding. TJ's jaw clenched. He'd seen transformers blow, seen lightning melt grounding cables, seen surges arc across substations and light up the night, but he'd never seen anything feed. Kevin's hand moved to his belt, fingers brushing the insulated handle of his wire cutters. Not a weapon, just something to hold, something real. We need to get back to the truck, TJ said. Verify ground integrity from a safe distance and... The radio on TJ's belt exploded with another shrill screech, like a voice screaming directly into his ear. He ripped it off and tossed it into the mud, half deafened by the blast. Theresa dropped her flashlight, hands clamped over her ears, eyes wide with panic. Then the tower behind them groaned. Metal warping, like something heavy pressed against it from the inside. Lightning again bright, revealing the shape clinging just below the crossbeam. It wasn't crouched. It was hanging upside down, arms and legs wrapped around steel like a spider the size of a person, glowing nerves pulsing beneath stretched skin. And its head wasn't a head. More like a cluster of tendrils, probing the metal, snaking into bolt holes, tasting electricity like scent. When the dark slammed down, Theresa screamed. She bolted, straight toward the small metal control shed that housed spare breakers and grounding tools. Dalton reached toward her. Theresa, don't. But she was already gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the tower. TJ hissed through his teeth. Damn it. Kevin moved first, boots pounding mud as he sprinted after her. TJ and Dalton followed, flashlights cutting wild arcs through the rain. By the time they reached the shed, the door slammed shut from the inside. Metal bolt sliding home. Theresa, TJ banged on the door. Open up. Her voice came through, high and trembling. I'm safe in here. I'm grounded. It can't... Something heavy landed on the roof above her. Metal rang like a drum hit by a sledgehammer. Then silence. TJ grabbed Dalton and Kevin, pulling them back, eyes fixed upward. The air tasted electric, metallic, wrong. Then, thump. Another impact. Heavier. Dalton whispered, voice breaking. It's on top of her. TJ's flashlight caught a ripple across the roof, long, jointed limbs moving in unnatural angles, tendrils snaking down the corners, probing the seams, searching for entry. Inside, Theresa's voice rose in pitch. Help me! It's hot! The walls are getting hot! Oh, God, help! Kevin stepped toward the door, hand on the bolt. TJ grabbed his wrist. Don't you open that? It gets in. Kevin's eyes were hard. She's burning. She's already dead. Theresa screamed. A sound that wasn't human anymore, just raw vocal cords tearing against air. Then everything went white. A blinding arc traveled through the metal walls, lighting every rivet, every seam, every bolt. The entire structure glowed like a filament. Theresa's silhouette burned through the metal from the inside, limbs rigid, back arched in a perfect bow, jaw wide open in a scream that had no sound left. The heat hit them like a furnace door opening. Dalton felt his skin tighten, hair singeing at the edges. The smell hit next copper and ozone and something worse, burning meat, cooking flesh. The metal walls sang with voltage, every molecule vibrating at frequencies that shouldn't exist. Theresa's body convulsed inside, nerves firing all at once, muscles contracting so hard, bones cracked. Her hands slammed against the walls from the inside, palms flat, fingers spread, skin blistering and peeling and fusing to hot steel. The light inside her skull showed through her hair, through her scalp, X-raying the bone beneath. Her teeth chattered so fast they shattered. Blood boiled in her veins, expanding, rupturing capillaries in her eyes until they burst and leaked down her cheeks like red tears. And through it all, the creature fed, pulling current through her body like she was just another conductor, just another length of wire in the infinite grid. When the electricity cut, the structure went dark. Smoke trickled from the seams. The smell was unbearable. Something heavy slid off the far side of the roof. Dalton bent over and vomited into the mud. Kevin stared at the shed, face pale, jaw tight. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Sarah used to say I worked too much, said I should come home, be present. TJ looked at him. Kevin's eyes were distant. I told her the grid needed me. The work mattered. Kevin. She died alone, Kevin said quietly, in a hospital, while I was fixing a transformer in Galveston. TJ swallowed hard. That's not... Theresa died alone too. Kevin's voice cracked, just slightly, screaming for help. Before TJ could respond, the air around them changed. The hum returned. Louder. Closer. Thunder rolled overhead, and the towers lit up one by one, sparks crawling along the lattice, electricity arcing between crossbeams. The grid walker was moving again, tower to tower, hunting. TJ grabbed Dalton's arm, pulled him upright. We run. Now. Kevin turned, eyes hard again. Where? TJ pointed toward the next service access point, half a mile down the line. There's a junction box, concrete bunker. Might give us cover. Might, Kevin repeated. It's all we've got. They ran. Chapter 3. Junction. Rain hammered them now, thick sheets, wind pushing it sideways, thunder rattling the ground under their boots. TJ led through low brush, away from the humming towers, away from the glowing metal bones that weren't supposed to glow. Dalton gasped behind him, boots slipping in mud. Kevin kept pace, silent, scanning the towers as they passed. Behind them, another tower lit up, then another, like dominoes falling in reverse. The gridwalker was following. They broke through a stand of pines and hit the service road. The junction box sat 50 yards ahead, a squat concrete bunker half buried in the earth, reinforced steel door facing the road. Built to withstand tornadoes and floods, maybe it could withstand this. TJ sprinted toward it, fumbling for his access keys. Dalton stumbled, caught himself, kept running. Kevin slowed, looking back at the towers. Lightning flashed. The creature clung to the nearest frame, 20 feet up, tendrils wrapped around steel, body pulsing with stolen voltage, its limbs bent at wrong angles, joints rotating in ways that violated anatomy. The head, that cluster of seeking tendrils, turned toward them, tracking. Kevin stopped running. "Kevin!" TJ shouted. "Move!" But Kevin just stood there, staring up at the thing, hand still resting on the wire cutters at his belt. The gridwalker launched. Not falling, launching, like a living arc of electricity compressed into flesh and bone. It hit the next tower with a sound like metal screaming, absorbed the impact, and leaped again. Closer. TJ got the door open, shoved Dalton inside. "Kevin, now!" Kevin turned, started running. The gridwalker landed on the road between him and the bunker. It rose slowly, limbs unfolding, body crackling with energy. Up close, it was worse. Skin translucent, veins glowing beneath like fiber optic cables, muscles that looked like braided wire. And the head, those tendrils writhed, tasting the air, tasting the current that flowed through Kevin's nervous system. Kevin stopped 10 feet away. The gridwalker tilted its head, almost curious. TJ raised his flashlight, beam hitting the creature's torso. The light bent around it, refracted through its body like passing through water. "Kevin," TJ said carefully. "Back up, slowly." Kevin didn't move. He stared at the thing, and something in his face shifted. Not fear, resignation. "It's been hunting us the whole time," Kevin said quietly. "Since we got here. Since before that, maybe." The grid walker took a step closer, weight making the gravel hiss. Kevin's hand tightened on the wire cutters. "I'm tired, TJ. Don't. I'm so goddamn tired." The grid walker lunged. Kevin didn't run. He swung the wire cutters not at the creature, but at the grounding cable running along the road. The insulated handles protected him just long enough to sever the line. Copper snapped. The loose end whipped upward, still carrying residual charge from somewhere down the grid. It hit the grid walker's torso. The creature shrieked a sound like a transformer exploding, high-pitched and metallic, and wrong. Electricity arced through its body in chaotic spirals, overloading whatever system allowed it to store and channel current. It convulsed, limbs thrashing, tendrils lashing wildly. Kevin stumbled backward, dropping the cutters. The grid walker recovered faster than it should have. It turned on Kevin with something that looked like rage. "Kevin, run!" TJ screamed. Kevin ran. But the grid walker was faster. It caught him in 3 strides, limbs wrapping around his torso like cables binding a spool. Kevin shouted, tried to pull free, but the thing lifted him off his feet with impossible strength. TJ started toward them. Kevin's eyes met his, clear, calm. "Get Dalton out," Kevin said. Then the grid walker began to feed. The current didn't come from the grid this time. It came from Kevin. The creature's tendrils pierced his skin, neck, chest, arms sinking deep, tapping into his nervous system like hooking jumper cables to a battery. Kevin's body went rigid, back arching, mouth opening in a silent scream as every nerve fired at once. The electricity flowed backward, pulled from his cells, from the sodium and potassium ions that made his muscles contract, from the bioelectric potential that kept his heart beating. The grid walker drank it like water, body glowing brighter, veins pulsing with stolen life. Kevin's skin went pale, then gray, then translucent as the charge left him. His eyes rolled back, showing only white. Blood leaked from his nose, his ears, his tear ducts, vessels rupturing as pressure dropped too fast. His heart stuttered, trying to beat without the electrical impulses that controlled rhythm. His lungs seized, ribs cracked as muscles contracted beyond their limits. And through it all, Kevin's face stayed calm, almost peaceful, like he'd been waiting for this. Like going home to an empty house hurt worse than dying. The grid walker pulled the last spark from his spine, and Kevin Copeland went limp, used up, empty, just meat that used to be a man. The creature dropped him into the mud. Kevin's body hit the ground like a sack of wet concrete, eyes open, staring at nothing. TJ couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what he'd just watched. The grid walker turned toward the bunker. Toward him. Dalton grabbed TJ's arm from inside, yanking him backward. "Close the door! Close the door!" TJ slammed the steel door shut, threw the bolt, and collapsed against it. Outside, the grid walker screamed again, that transformer explosion sound, and something heavy slammed into the door hard enough to dent the steel inward. Dalton pressed himself against the far wall, chest heaving, eyes wide and wet. TJ slid down to the floor, back against the door, feeling every impact as the creature tried to force its way in. "It killed him," Dalton whispered. It just drank him." "I know. What the fuck is that thing?" TJ closed his eyes, feeling the vibrations through the steel, His mind raced, piecing together what he'd seen, the melted copper, the consumed grounding cables, the way it traveled tower to tower, the way it fed on Kevin. It's feeding on the grid, TJ said quietly. Not just electricity, current, voltage, anything that flows. But Kevin wasn't. We're electrical, TJ said. Nervous system runs on bioelectricity, neurons firing, muscles contracting, it's all current, just smaller scale. Dalton stared at him. So we're just batteries to that thing? TJ nodded slowly. Yeah, I think we are. Another impact shook the door. Then another. Then silence. Dalton held his breath. TJ listened, ear pressed to the steel. Nothing. No screaming, no humming, no impacts. Just rain hammering the roof and thunder rolling in the distance. Did it leave? Dalton whispered. TJ didn't answer, because he knew the truth. It didn't leave. It was waiting. The silence stretched. Dalton's breathing slowed, each exhale visible in the cold air of the bunker. TJ pressed his ear against the steel door, listening for movement outside. Nothing. Just rain, thunder, the distant hum of towers that shouldn't be humming. Maybe it gave up, Dalton whispered. TJ didn't answer. He knew better. Predators don't give up when they're hungry. They wait, they adapt, they learn. 5 minutes passed. 10. Dalton shifted against the wall, wiping rain and mud from his face. TJ, we can't. The lights came on. Not the bunker lights, those were dead. No power to the building. The emergency strip along the ceiling. Battery backup. Dalton looked up, confused. That shouldn't. The bulbs flickered, brightened, then brightened more. Too bright. Filaments glowing white hot. Glass beginning to smoke. TJ's stomach dropped. Get away from the walls. He grabbed Dalton, pulled him to the center of the small room, away from anything metal, anything conductive. The light strips exploded in sequence, pop, 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 raining glass and sparks. The metal equipment lockers along the wall began to hum, vibrating against their bolts. The steel door glowed faintly, heat building, rivets beginning to glow red. It's feeding the backup batteries, TJ said, voice tight, overloading them. Dalton stared at the door. It's trying to cook us like it cooked Theresa. The temperature in the bunker climbed, fast. The air went from cold to warm to hot in seconds. Sweat broke out on TJ's face. The concrete walls radiated heat like an oven warming up. Dalton's hands shook. We're gonna die in here. We're gonna die just like she did. No, TJ said firmly. We're not. He moved to the equipment locker, the one that wasn't glowing yet, and yanked it open. Inside, wire cutters, insulated gloves, a grounding rod, and something else. A flare gun. TJ grabbed it, checked the chamber, one flare loaded. What's that going to do? Dalton asked. Distract it. TJ moved to the door, heat radiating through the steel so intense he couldn't touch it. He aimed the flare gun at the small ventilation grate in the ceiling, the only opening besides the door. When I fire this, the gridwalker's gonna come for the heat signature, the light. When it does, we run for the next tower. You stay close to me. You don't stop. You don't look back. Understood? Dalton nodded, not trusting his voice. TJ fired. The flare screamed through the grate, punched into the night sky, and exploded in brilliant red light 50 feet above the bunker. Magnesium burned at 3,000 degrees, brighter than lightning, painting the whole area in crimson. The humming stopped. The heat stopped. Outside, something shrieked. TJ threw the bolt, kicked the door open, and ran. Dalton followed, boots hitting mud, lungs pulling hot air that tasted like copper and smoke. The flare burned overhead, spinning as it fell, casting wild shadows across the towers. The gridwalker launched from the bunker roof where it had been crouched the whole time, feeding current into the building's electrical system, cooking them slowly. It chased the flare, leaping, reaching. The bright light drew it like a moth, tendrils extending, trying to catch the falling star of burning metal. TJ and Dalton sprinted toward the tree line, away from the towers, away from the road. Branches whipped their faces, roots tried to trip them, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the flare hit the ground and sputtered out. Darkness returned, and in that darkness, the gridwalker screamed a sound of pure frustration, pure rage. It had been so close to feeding. TJ pulled Dalton behind a massive pine, both of them pressing against the bark, trying to control their breathing. Through the trees, they could see the towers silhouetted against the storm. The gridwalker moved between them, searching, tendrils tasting the air. Hunting. Dalton's voice was barely a whisper. It's learning. TJ nodded grimly. Yeah, it is. What do we do? TJ looked at the towers, at the transmission lines connecting them, at the whole goddamn infrastructure that kept the lights on and the gridwalker fed. We cut the line, he said. Chapter 4. The Line. They stayed hidden for another few minutes, watching the gridwalker search the area around the bunker. It moved with purpose now, not random hunting, intelligence, learning their patterns. We can't stay here, TJ said finally. Dalton looked at him, face pale in the darkness. You want to go back out there? We stay here, we die when it finds us, or when the storm gets worse and we freeze. Maybe someone will come looking for us. TJ shook his head. Grid's down. Dispatch won't send another crew until the storm clears. That's protocol. So what do we do? TJ thought about it. Thought about the towers, the transformers, the way the creature moved through the grid like blood through veins. We cut the line, he said. Dalton blinked. What? We sever the transmission line, kill the grid. If it's feeding on current, no current means it starves. That's insane. You know how much infrastructure that'll kill? How many people lose power? They're already without power, TJ said. And if we don't stop this thing here, it spreads. Down the line, into Houston, into the whole goddamn state. Dalton swallowed. How do we cut a transmission line? TJ pointed back toward the bunker. Thermite charges, for emergency disconnects. We climb the tower, place the charge, blow the line. While that thing hunts us. Yeah, that's suicide. TJ met his eyes. You got a better idea? Dalton didn't answer. You don't have to come, TJ said quietly. You can stay here. Wait it out. Dalton stared into the darkness, thought about Theresa screaming in that shed, thought about Kevin's calm face as the thing drained him empty, thought about dying alone in the woods. Fuck that, Dalton said, voice shaking but steady. I'm with you. TJ almost smiled. All right then. They moved carefully back toward the bunker, staying low, using the trees for cover. The gridwalker had moved to the far side of the clearing, investigating the spent flare, tendrils probing the burned-out casing. TJ slipped inside the bunker while Dalton kept watch. He found 2 thermite charges in the equipment locker and strapped one to his belt. He handed the other to Dalton. On my signal, TJ whispered. They crept toward the tallest transmission tower, the main junction that fed substation 47A. If they could blow that line, they'd isolate this section of the grid, starve the creature. Maybe. Lightning flashed, and TJ saw it. The gridwalker. 3 towers away, clinging to the lattice, tendrils wrapped around steel, watching them. Run, TJ said. They ran. The creature launched, tower to tower, closing distance with impossible speed. Dalton's lungs burned, legs pumping, mud sucking at his boots. TJ pulled ahead, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. They hit the base of the main tower. TJ grabbed the ladder, started climbing. Dalton followed, hands slipping on wet steel, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Behind them, the gridwalker landed on the road with a sound like metal screaming. TJ climbed faster, muscles burning, not looking down. 30 feet, 40, 50. The wind howled, rain stinging his face, lightning flashing close enough to feel the heat. Dalton's boots slipped. He caught himself, kept climbing, breath coming in ragged gasps. Below, the creature began to climb. TJ reached the junction point, a massive crossbeam where 3 transmission lines met. He pulled the thermite charge from his belt, hands shaking, trying to remember the arming sequence. Dalton reached the beam, grabbed the steel, looked down. The gridwalker was 20 feet below, climbing, fast. And, I know. TJ armed the charge, magnetic clamp engaging, timer set to 30 seconds. He slapped it onto the primary cable. Go, he shouted. They climbed down, boots slipping, hands raw, the gridwalker gaining with every second. 20 feet from the ground. 15. 10. The creature reached the crossbeam, tendrils wrapping around the thermite charge, probing it, tasting the chemical compounds inside. The charge detonated. White-hot magnesium ignited at 4,000 degrees, cutting through the transmission cable like butter. The severed line whipped downward, spraying molten metal, cable ends snapping apart with a sound like a gunshot. The gridwalker shrieked. The current it had been feeding on died instantly. The grid went dark. No hum, no buzz, just dead metal and rain. The creature convulsed, body flickering, losing cohesion. It fell from the tower, limbs thrashing, hitting the ground hard enough to crack mud. TJ and Dalton dropped the last few feet, stumbled away from the tower, watching the thing writhe. It wasn't dead, but it was hurt, starving, desperate. It turned toward them, body dimming, tendrils reaching. Lightning struck, not from the creature, from the sky. A massive bolt hit the tower directly above them, billions of volts slamming into steel, traveling down the lattice, grounding through the earth. And through TJ. He was still touching the ladder, still grounded to the tower. The current hit him like a freight train. Dalton watched TJ's body go rigid, back arching, every muscle locking as electricity poured through him. His skin lit up from the inside, veins glowing like circuit traces, bones visible through flesh for a single frozen heartbeat. The smell hit next ozone and copper and burning hair, burning skin. TJ's mouth opened in a scream that had no sound, vocal cords seizing, lungs paralyzed. The lightning didn't kill him instantly, it cooked him, slowly. Voltage traveling through salt water and tissue, boiling blood in his veins, rupturing cells, frying nerves until they snapped like overloaded fuses. His heart stopped, restarted, stopped again as the rhythm shattered. His eyes went white, pupils blown, retinas scorched. Hands fused to the ladder, skin melting into steel, fingernails blackening and cracking. The current carved a path through his chest, through his spine, through his legs, and into the ground. And through it all, TJ's face stayed frozen in that final expression, not pain, not fear, just surprise, like he couldn't believe this was how it ended. When the lightning cut, TJ's body fell. Steam rose off his clothes. His eyes were open, white, empty. Dalton staggered backward, vision blurring, chest heaving, unable to process what he'd just seen. The gridwalker crawled toward TJ's corpse, tendrils reaching, searching for any residual charge left in the cooling meat. Dalton turned and ran. Chapter 5. Culvert. Rain hammered the earth, turning everything to mud and darkness. Dalton ran blind, boots slipping, arms pumping, lungs screaming. He didn't know where he was going, didn't care. Just away, away from the towers, away from the gridwalker, away from TJ's smoking body and Kevin's empty eyes and Theresa's burned silhouette. His foot hit a dip in the ground. He fell hard, rolled, slid 10 feet down a muddy embankment into a drainage ditch. Cold water rushed around him, soaking him to the bone, flooding his boots. He scrambled upright, looked around. A culvert. Just a concrete drainage tunnel under the service road, maybe 3 feet high, dark, tight, but shelter. Dalton crawled inside, shoving himself deeper into the tunnel, scraping elbows, forehead hitting slimy concrete. Rainwater poured past his hips, ice cold, stinking of rot and chemicals. He pressed himself against the curved wall, shaking so hard his teeth clacked together. Outside, thunder rolled. Footsteps. Not human footsteps. Something heavier, metal scraping concrete, wet sounds, joints popping. Dalton held his breath, eyes wide in the darkness. The grid walker moved past the culvert opening, silhouetted against the storm, limbs dragging, body dim now, barely glowing, starving. It stopped, tilted its head, listening. Dalton's heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought it might break through. The creature's tendrils snaked toward the culvert entrance, probing the air, tasting for bioelectricity, for the spark of neurons firing, for prey. Dalton squeezed his eyes shut, pressed harder against the wall, willing himself to disappear. The tendrils reached into the tunnel, then stopped. The gridwalker shrieked that transformer explosion sound, frustrated, hungry, dying. It moved on. Dalton stayed frozen, lungs burning, not daring to breathe. The sound of the creature faded, tower to tower, searching, hunting. Dalton waited. Minutes stretched into hours. The rain kept falling. The water kept rising, climbing his chest, his shoulders, forcing him to tilt his head back to keep his nose above the surface. He didn't move. Couldn't move. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. TJ's body lit from inside, Kevin's calm face as he died, Theresa's silhouette burning through metal. He shook, and shook, and shook. The water rose higher, his lips went numb, his fingers stopped responding. Hypothermia crept in like fog, wrapping around his thoughts, slowing them down. He almost let go, almost let the water take him. It would be easier than remembering, but somewhere deep in his brain, some stubborn animal part that refused to quit, a spark fired. Not yet. Not like this. Dalton tilted his head back, keeping his mouth above water, and waited for dawn. Somewhere in the distance, lightning flashed. The gridwalker screamed. Towers hummed and died, as it traveled the line, searching for current it couldn't find. The thermite charge had worked. The grid was dead, and the grid walker was starving. Dalton stayed in that concrete throat as the sky turned from black to gray, as the rain became drizzle, then mist, then nothing, as the world went silent except for dripping water and distant birdsong. He crawled out at dawn, covered in mud, shaking, hypothermic, barely able to stand. The towers stood silent, dark, dead. No hum, no sparks, no gridwalker. Dalton found the service truck where they'd left it, keys still in the ignition. He climbed behind the wheel with hands that didn't work right, started the engine on the third try, and drove south. He didn't look back. Not once. He couldn't. because if he looked back, he might see it still there, clinging to a tower, waiting, watching, learning. Epilogue, Terlingua. Dalton Jones quit Houston Grid Authority 2 days later, didn't pick up his final check, didn't answer calls from dispatch or HR or the lawyers who wanted statements about what happened to TJ Brewster, Kevin Copeland, and Theresa Mathews. The official report called it a lightning strike. Multiple casualties. Tragic accident. Dalton knew better. He drove west until the cell towers faded and the world stopped humming, bought a small piece of dry land near Terlingua, just south of Big Bend. A shack with a wood stove, propane lamps, a hand pump for water, no wiring, no appliances, no connection to the grid. Locals said he'd get sick of it, heat in summer, cold in winter, isolation year-round. They didn't know. They didn't hear thunderstorms the way he did. Every time lightning flashed on the horizon, Dalton lay in bed with his hands over his ears, whispering into the dark. Don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. Because sometimes, out past the Chisos Mountains, he swore he saw faint flashes crawling from pole to pole across the empty desert, moving south, following the lines, hunting. The Texas grid was independent, isolated, 300,000 miles of transmission lines with nowhere else to go. And somewhere out there, traveling tower to tower, the grid walker was still hungry. Dalton never turned on a light again. He burned candles, split wood, lived like his ancestors did, before Edison, before Tesla, before humanity learned to catch lightning in copper wire and send it screaming across the continent. He survived. But some nights, when the wind blew just right, he heard the hum, faint, distant, getting closer, and Dalton knew deep in his bones, in the bioelectric spark that kept his heart beating, that the grid walker remembered him, that it could taste his fear from miles away, that someday, when the storm season came back around, it would find him, because the grid always remembers, and what walks the wires never stops hunting. Folklore note: the old linemen in Texas have stories. Not the kind they tell new hires during orientation, not the safety lectures about lockout-tagout procedures or the OSHA-approved speeches about respecting high voltage, the real stories. The ones they whisper over beers at retirement parties, the ones that make grown men refuse storm calls. They talk about the grid walker. Some say it's always been there, sleeping in the substations, dormant in the transformers, waiting for the right conditions. Others claim it came from the Galveston hurricane of 1900, when the entire city's electrical system shorted out and something crawled from the wreckage. A few old-timers swear it was born in the 50s, when Texas built its independent grid isolated from the rest of the country, proud and stubborn. They say the isolation created something, a predator that evolved to hunt the only prey available. The warnings are always the same. Don't work the towers alone during storm season. Don't touch metal when the sky goes sideways white. Don't ignore the hum that sounds wrong, the sparks that crawl instead of flash, the heat shimmer on cold steel. And if you see something moving tower to tower, if the grounding cables are melted instead of cut, if the copper is gone but the theft alarm's never triggered, you leave. You don't investigate. You don't troubleshoot. You don't try to fix it. You call it in as a lightning strike and you drive south until the towers disappear behind you. Because the grid walker doesn't just feed on electricity. It feeds on the people who maintain it, the linemen who climb those towers thinking they're in control, the engineers who believe they understand current and voltage and resistance. It feeds on anyone foolish enough to think they've tamed lightning. Texas loses between 15 and 20 electrical workers every year. Most are accidents, genuine mistakes, safety violations, bad luck. But some, the ones where the bodies are found with no external injuries, the ones where the cause of death is listed as cardiac arrest, despite the victim being 25 and healthy? The old-timers know. They've seen the burn patterns that don't match lightning, the corpses drained gray, the towers that hum when the breakers are off. They know the gridwalker is real, and they know it's still out there, traveling the 300,000 miles of Texas transmission lines, pole to pole, tower to tower, substation to substation, feeding on the current that keeps the state running, waiting for the next storm, the next blackout, the next crew sent out into the dark to fix what can't be fixed. The independent Texas grid stretches from the Panhandle to the Gulf, from El Paso to the Louisiana border. It's isolated, cut off from the national network by choice and pride, which means whatever lives inside those lines can't get out. But it can't be stopped, either. So if you're driving through Texas on a storm night, and you see the lights flicker, and the power dies, and you hear that distant hum like metal singing, stay in your car, lock the doors, and pray the gridwalker is feeding somewhere else. Because the grid always remembers, and what walks the wires never stops hunting. Well, boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Oh, poor Dalton. So brave. So stupid. Thought he could blow the line and starve the beast. Thought cutting the current would save him. But some things don't die when you kill the power. Some things just get hungrier. And TJ, Kevin, Theresa, they learned the hard way that the Texas grid doesn't just carry electricity. It carries something else. Something that's been walking those wires since before any of them were born. And Dalton's out there in Terlingua, living by candlelight, pretending he's safe, while the gridwalker crawls closer every storm season, just how we love it. If this story shocked you the right way, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every day at 8 p.m. Central, and trust me, tomorrow's even nastier. Leave a like if you'll never look at power lines the same way again, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What keeps the lights on in your neck of the woods? Have you ever worked on the grid? I'm always hunting for the next nightmare. Remember, the next time the lights go out during a storm, maybe don't assume it's just the weather. Maybe something's feeding. And maybe it knows you're there, watching your phone glow in the dark, carrying just enough bioelectricity to make you worth hunting. Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the towers. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and the grid is always watching.